saturated and disquieting mood while leveraging a nightmarishly gonzo performance from Nicolas Cage, Longlegs is a satanic horror that effectively instills panic. That's right. That's the aggregated review right now of all the critics when it comes to Longlegs. 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, 65% audience scores. The audience is not digging it as much. I'll give my reviews. I just watched it deep in the heart of Texas as I returned from Major League Baseball's All-Star Game. As far as our new movies last week, I saw Beverly Hills Cop Axel left. We just ran out of time, quite honestly. Harry and I were rolling, just forgot about it. But yeah, I can give you my review of that because I think you've all had a chance to watch it now on Netflix. And Roadhouse, which I watched on the plane down. I'm always lucky to do these radio hits back home in Canada, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver. Among them, George Russick is one of the hosts in Calgary 960, does a great job. He'd asked me previously my thoughts on Roadhouse, which came out the remake with Jake Gyllenhaal. It came out, I think, I want to say in March. And I come on very intermittently. So he'd asked me maybe a couple months ago, and I said, no, I still haven't seen it. I said, listen, I heard mixed reviews. I'm not in a rush to see it, but if you really want me to see it, go, all right, next time we have you on, you have to watch it. I said, okay. I got a text Saturday from his radio producer. Hey, George wants you on Monday. So on the flight, I go, I got to watch Roadhouse. So actually, no, excuse me. Saturday night, I stayed up till midnight. I was like, I got to watch Roadhouse. And then on the flight, even better, they had the original. So I Roadhouse all week, and I watched the Jake Gyllenhaal version. I watched the Patrick Swayze version. We'll do some Roadhouse as well. But here's the big news. We got Joe Buck, baby. That's right. One of my favorite broadcasters of all time. Been a fan of his for almost 30 years. I cannot wait. The 8-time Emmy Award winner. He's going to be awesome. And we're going to be talking movies because he's buddies with Paul Rudd and John Hamm. He's been in Brockmire. It's going to be awesome. I cannot wait till you all listen to Joe Buck. As always, please go to Apple Podcasts where you can subscribe, rate, and review. I made a big plea last week, and I believe some people did answer. Brett Baker, I definitely saw one of the OGs. He's the best. He immediately put a blurb. The rest of you, you're on the clock. Please do go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, rate, and review, and give us some love. And the big news here for all of us is Harry is getting it done. We are officially on YouTube. That's right. In honor of Joe Buck's appearance, we are on YouTube, which is absolutely fantastic news. Okay, I'm scrolling right now. We have a bunch. Yep, McPeak came through. I knew he would, but a bunch of other blurbs, so thank you. Lots of good 5-star reviews here. I appreciate you all very, very much. Before we get rolling, it's good always to be back catching up with my man Harry. His grandfather turned 90. I mean, this is unbelievable. Like, tell me what it's like hanging around not just one, but several 90-year-olds.
You know, they are. I was telling you offline. He's got the real he's a sharp 90, which was great. The best part was getting him talking about kind of old stuff. Like we were talking about. I asked him about where he was when JFK got shot and what he thought about Vietnam. Like just hearing about what it was actually like. There was a very funny movie related anecdote he shared, which was when we went to his first movie in Detroit, Michigan, first movie in the movie theaters. How much do you think it cost?
First movie, I'm going to say 75 cents.
Okay, 12 cents to get in. And it was 5 cents.
You got popcorn. A nickel there, kid? Yeah, we can get you in. A nickel for popcorn.
Yes. And then he would go and sneak in and let his friends in through the back door, right? Yeah. And the movie theater got hip to that. And they put up a sign. So it was 12 cents to get in the movie. The fine, if you snuck somebody in, was $10,000. Oh, no, sorry.
I wanted to guess the number. I wanted to say 25 cents.
$10,000. It's like, where do you? That's like the whole city of Detroit costs $10,000.
Just send me to prison then. If it's going to cost $10,000, I'll do 2 years in prison rather than pay that fine.
That was a pretty funny anecdote, but no.
Oh, that's great, man. Props to Grandpa. I don't want to say I often think about death. I'm not one of those people, but I will on occasion think how old I'd like to live by. I do think there's a point you start to say, I think I've had enough. Like, listen, life expectancy. I went home for my dad's birthday. He turned 78. I get paranoid with these things. Male life expectancy is 78. I said, I'm going to be there for my dad every single birthday moving forward, right? I think anything above that, hey, you're doing well. I believe women is 80, 81, 82. So I'm like, anything above that's a win. But like 90, like that's great for Grandpa. But like, does he want to make it to 100? I personally would not want to live to 100, I think.
It's funny because that was a topic of the weekend, and a few.
Hey, Grandpa, when do you want to die?
Well, and a few people shared some anecdotes about being like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And his answer, and I think this is how you get to 90, is he was just like, "I don't think about it." He just is locked in. He's living his life.
It's a good point. Anxiety and worry and fear, that shit drags you down. If he's just like, yeah, whatever, man, I'm living my best life. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, he just was not really thinking about it.
To segue to people who are old and now dead, I want to quickly give some love to a trio of deaths because celebrity deaths come in threes. So, quick thoughts here. Donald Sutherland passed away recently. Great Canadian. Often on lists, people ask me who's the best actor never nominated for an Oscar. One of my first answers is always Donald Sutherland. I'll give you another one. Kevin Bacon just turned 66, by the way. But Sutherland never nominated. Finally got one of those honorary Oscars, which we all know is phony, but he should have been nominated for Ordinary People, which is an excellent movie. It's in the shadow of arguably my favorite movie ever, Raging Bull, and Redford won for Best Director, of course, so it should have been Scorsese. Mary Tyler Moore is really good. Timothy Hutton won for supporting actor, but Sutherland was not nominated playing the grieving father, and I think that's the one that he should have been nominated for, among other great performances. Backdraft, of course, is a great, memorable performance. The Undoing, he's got a really wonderful scene, which is really funny. He talks about being a cocksucker. But I want to just mention one clip that my friend Will Folger sent me in which he talks about how much he loves baseball. This guy once said, this is to Harry's point with the final movie theaters. Guess how much, Harry? Donald Sutherland loved the Expos. Now, Oberman texted me. Apparently, he was a big Dodgers fan growing up, but I said, I know he loves the Expos. And in Jonah Carey's book about the Expos, he talked about the fact he was like their celebrity fan. Everyone's got a celebrity fan. Well, Donald Sutherland was the Expos guy. Guess how much he spent? Like, again, you're on set shooting. I don't know where he was, France or something. He's calling his buddy. He goes, just hold the phone. I want to hear the Expos game. I don't even know if it was a playoff game. Might have been like, July 18th. Guess how much he racked up in bills. I don't know if it was one game or just, let's call it a series of games. Phone charges during the Expos on the radio.
Oh my, like basically through international calling, speaker to phone. Oh man. I'm guessing that's about $5 a minute for an international call. So whatever that is pitched
3-hour baseball game, $7,000 you racked up. It was unbelievable.
Yay.
$7,000. But the clip that Will sent me is he talked about baseball being like sex. I'm like, wait, what? I think I missed that part. I love a suicide squeeze as much as the next guy, but he goes, no, it's like lovemaking. He's like, it's slowly developing. Eventually it builds, you get the climax. Like, oh, right.
I got to watch baseball differently. Yeah.
Anyway, this guy's watching a different game than I am here. Okay. You trust me. I was at the All-Star game. It wasn't like that, but rest in peace to Donald Sutherland. Again, great Canadian actor. His son, Kiefer, I met the Critics' Choice Awards a few months ago. When I went up to Kiefer, I just came in, fellow Canadian, wanted to say hi. He was like, oh, hey, what's up, man? So I obviously love Donald and love Kiefer as well. So rest in peace to him. Robert Towne just passed away, legendary screenwriter of Chinatown. I don't want to disparage him as I praise him, but it's funny. People often mention Chinatown as the greatest script of all time, and I believe Sam Morril was on Reset. I think he said that as well. He goes, "Oh, Chinatown was the best," but he said Double Indemnity, which is a great choice by Sam. It's an awesome script. To further his point, I do think Chinatown's an amazing script. But there's an awesome book. And again, if you're an avid fan of cinephile, remember the interview we had with Sam Wasson, who's a great author and wrote a book about Chinatown, in which he pointed out Towne's script is certainly original and unique, and he had a real gift for characters and dialogue. But when Polanski read it, he's like, this is the biggest pile of crap I've read in my life. It was Polanski who completely changed the structure of it. He said it was just free-flowing all over the place. It was like no true narrative. So Polanski really should get a lot more credit for shaping it. And the ending was Polanski's. Towne had a different ending. And Polanski said, no, this has to be as dark and cynical and bleak as it gets. And maybe it was after what he was dealing with Shannon Tate. People have referenced that was going through Polanski's mind, still dealing with it. He said, no, the ending of this movie, she freaking gets shot, and this guy's going to get away with it. And Nicholson's leaving town. That's it, period. So Robert Towne is a great screenwriter. He gets credit for the greatest screenplay of all time. But I have to say, and say what you will about Polanski off the field, 13-year-old statutory rape, I got it. But as a writer, Towne's script is a heavyweight champion. Polanski gets a lot of credit. Having said that, Towne wrote a lot of other good scripts as well, and was always a very good script doctor. Like, he'd be the guy who'd call in sometimes just to shape things up. So he's passed away at the age of 89, but obviously a great writer. It's pretty rare they even mention, like, how many writers would you even know off the top of your head, like, of that era? So even the fact that he was, somebody who was that accomplished, was able to do that at that point in his life. I mean, it's pretty impressive. Again, was tight with Nicholson. Also wrote The Two Jakes, which isn't, nearly as acclaimed as the sequel, of course, Chinatown. The Last Detail's a really funny movie. Shampoo. Worked with Tom Cruise a few times. Days of Thunder, The Firm, and the Mission Impossible franchise. You're a fan of those movies as well. I know Tequila Sunrise, Under the Radar, crime thriller, and Personal Best. You talk about the LGBTQT community. That was a really early movie as far as dealing with lesbians. Sports drama, Personal Best, 1982. I remember seeing it years ago. It was excellent. So Robert Towne definitely touched a lot of different beats in his life as a writer and a director as well. And lastly, Shelley Duvall just passed away. I think of her immediately, and I think of The Shining, the fact that apparently Duvall Stanley Kubrick just made her life miserable. I mean, the stories they had on set were like he would just do take after take. And Nicholson, again, in Watson's book about Chinatown, says that Nicholson's a great team player, so I don't think he was tormenting her, but I don't know how helpful he was. Maybe there's nothing he could do because Cooper is like, yeah, let's try another one. Let's try another one. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, if you think David Fincher does a lot of takes, the stories about Shelley Duvall just being tortured by Kubrick for like 100 takes is the stuff of legend. You know, allegedly she never recovered and stuff. Of course, she worked with Freakin' as well, but the Shine's a hell of a performance, man. She was a great actress, certainly in that movie, and had wonderful performances throughout the way. Just passed away here July 11th, dies of 75. Even the way she's described as Robert Altman protege and tormented wife in The Shining. Like, yep, that's what your bio is going to be, and that's what it is in this instance. All right, let's do some movies before we get to Joe Buck. All right, we kick it off with Longlegs, which I was able to check out at the theater at the Studio Movie House in Arlington, Texas. Not sure where you're at here, Harry, with these movie theaters, which are a little avant-garde, a little foo-foo. Like, you go there, and it actually worked out to my benefit because I had not had a chance to, really dive into some good brisket. So I get to the movie theater, and I'm thinking, Milk Duds is fine, but they go, no. You go to your seat, you press a button, somebody will come and deliver your food. Just, oh my God, but do I get to fed grapes and like someone to, massage my feet while I'm at it? But it was all good. So I got the brisket and fries delivered to my chair, $15, 18% gratuity added. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever it takes to watch a movie these days, I'll do it. But Longlegs, you go into it with talk about a lot of anticipation. So some of the buzz for this has been amazing. People are calling it the best serial killer movie since Silence of the Lambs, echoes of David Fincher's Seven, and all the rest. Like, oh my God, this is awfully high praise. And ultimately, you go there and it's hard to match those expectations. But I want to start with the fact it's been a bona fide hit. Like, this movie had a budget of $11 million and opened at $22 million. It was expected to be maybe third or fourth after Fly Me to the Moon, which is my other option, Channing Tatum and Scarlett Johansson as far as, big budget releases. That did not do very well at the box. That was another miss for Apple Plus. But for Longlegs to basically double the anticipated budget speaks to their social media campaign, which was very smart and effective. I believe in Los Angeles, they had billboards up saying, call this number. And if you called the number, it was like a serial killer talking to you. Like, this is like old school marketing stuff they used to do back in the 90s, back when this movie would have been very, very popular. And the big part of the attraction to it was this, not just the fact you're saying it could be as good as Silence of the Lambs and so on, but the fact that, you're saying that Nicolas Cage is in a serial killer movie. I know he's the bad guy. I can't wait. Now, here was the key in the trailer. You don't see him. I go, okay, smart. This is like the Jaws. This is, the shark in Jaws. You got to wait to see him. And so thankfully, Cage is like literally starts the movie. So you get a glimpse of him. Like, I don't even want to describe him. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I saw one critic refer to it as like an androgynous glam rock look, which is really funny. But it's Nick Cage doing Nick Cage. Now, I thought, because he's known for such over-the-top performances, I thought he was going to be like subtle and restrained. I was incorrect. This is Nick. This is Nick Cage. Wait, I'm normally over the top. Let me just go crazy. But he's got like this high falsetto voice, and again, the look is basically indescribable. I'm sure you can Google at this point, see what he looks like. But he's only in it maybe 12 minutes. Like, it's again just like the shark in Jaws. It's barely in it, but he's really memorable, I will say. And I wouldn't quite go to the level of an Oscar nominee, but he's definitely memorable and different. And it's certainly a performance that Cage can give that will single-handedly have people talking about the movie, but ultimately the movie has to be good enough to sustain the reviews, etc. And I will say, with those types of expectations going in, it didn't reach that barometer for me, but I thought it was an effective movie. I thought it was disturbing. I thought it was chilling. Essentially, the story is there's a serial killer who is convincing fathers, because of this cult, hypnosis, whatever you want to call it, Hail Satan, with a nod to Rosemary's Baby, but to murder their own families. You have these like stories of like daughters being murdered, mothers being murdered, and knifed and stuff. Like, it's just horrific. And of course, when you go through some of the detail they're showing, it's really, really nasty. But it definitely gets under your skin. I wouldn't necessarily recommend watching it late at night if you get the willies. But for movies like this to have this kind of success, I think is notable. Longlegs is a movie. I'll give it 3 Maple Leafs because, again, it's something different. I like the fact it is a bona fide success. Oz Perkins, by the way, is the writer and director. He's making himself now a name, certainly with this kind of movie. And the lead performance was by Maika Monroe, who was very good as the main agent. Also, Blair Underwood, always one of those great 90s actors. He shows up. His first scene, by the way, speaking of baseball, they're in the car, and very random. Normally if you said to me, what baseball team gets referenced in movies, I'd be like Yankees, Dodgers, Cardinals, maybe Mets. He just sitting there, he goes, man, how about this run the Mariners have been on? And I go, that might be the first time I've ever seen someone mention the Seattle Mariners. And he's like, and he actually says, he goes, I wish I could talk to someone about how well the Mariners are playing. And she goes, well, talk to your wife. He's like, no, she just pretends she doesn't care. So Blair Underwood's character, if you want to talk about Julio Rodriguez or the great starting pitching of the Seattle Mariners, I'm here for you. Alicia Witt also very memorable in the film as well. Make sure you check out Longlegs, currently in theaters. Next up, Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. It's currently available on Netflix. Now, this is a movie that do we really need? Like, that's the first thought process immediately. When you think of Eddie Murphy, you're like, like what are we doing here? But I get it. He's a comedic icon. He's one of the funniest people who's ever lived. He's on the short list, certainly, of memorable stand-ups. I was about to say Mount Rushmore stand-ups, but he didn't do a ton of it. But again, if you talk to anybody, Delirious and Raw are two of the funniest stand-ups performances ever. They're hugely influential. He's never really retreated back to it, whereas, other guys have taken a break like Chappelle and such and gone back. Once Eddie went to movies, of course, he was great. And you could do a Mount Rushmore movies, whether it's, Coming to America for me is probably at the head of the list, but I love Bowfinger. I think it's criminally underrated. And again, he's shown his dramatic chops in films like Dreamgirls as well. But recently it's kind of like, all right, Netflix likes to recycle these guys a little bit. And Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F., I go in with very diminished expectations, because the third one I thought was atrocious. The first one I like. The second one, I couldn't even remember. The third one I remember was being atrocious. I mean, there's a scene at the amusement park. I said, this is an awful movie. So I go in subdued expectations on Netflix, and it was fine. Which as far as my lexicon's concerned, generally fine means I'm being disparaging. But I do actually mean in this instance, I thought it was fine. You pick it up. He's now in his 60s. I thought it was very good as far as a nostalgia trip. You get Judge Reinhold. You get Taggart, who's unbelievable. You got Paul Reiser showing up in the first scene. So again, if you love Eddie Murphy, if you're a completist, if you just want to see him back in that role again as Axel Foley, got the jeans, got the jacket, talking Detroit. Shout out to the Lions now, who are a legit Super Bowl contender, thanks to Dan Campbell and Jared Goff. It's fun. Early scene at the Red Wings game I thought was funny. I generally enjoyed the first half more than the second half. Like, just being back in those shoes again and seeing that environment to me was enjoyable. Once it started getting a little bit too much of the plot, then I started to say, okay, here's where the plot contrivances come up and it becomes predictable. And there has to be some story of old cop, young cop. In this instance, it's his daughter who he's trying to reconcile with, and that's the dramatic thrust of the film. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, always a good actor. He's playing the young cop in this instance, with whom him and Axel butt heads. So it's certainly formulaic and nothing original, but are there a handful of amusing moments? Sure. Eddie Murphy speaking patois. Are the action scenes serviceable? I would say yes. So ultimately, I'll give it to Maple Leafs, but I'm not rushing out to go tell everyone to go see Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Of the two for yourself here, I would imagine, I think Longlegs you'll enjoy. I can't imagine you're running to go watch Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F.
I don't think so. I actually, it's funny. I haven't even seen the original Beverly Hills Cop. So it was on my list to dive into, but and I probably will get to it eventually. But Longlegs, I want to see. That's on my. I got to see it. Pretty much all my friends saw it in theaters over the last couple of days. And they're all the reviews are trickling out that they're really excited. It's actually funny you said the Hail Satan thing. I'm in a group text with a bunch of guys, and somebody out of nowhere texted Hail Satan, and I was like, "What is that? What's that?" And it just clicked that must be what that's a reference to. So
I don't know if you're currently in a relationship. Are you?
No, I'm not. No.
Okay, so let me ask you this: if you were to meet a young lady and you're out having about, at what point, if she just dropped the fact that she's a Satan worshiper, would you think we got to eject in this one? Like, what if she legitimately said to you, "Hey," as you raised a glass, whatever beverage, she goes, "Hey, hail Satan." What would your reaction be?
I guess she reform. There's all kinds of, like, in Judaism, there's reform, Orthodox. Like, if she's like a reform Satanist and she's also like, lovely, then I could have at least have a drink, see where we're at.
At least see where the night goes in this instance, the reformed Satanist. We'll see. Quickly, I want to discuss Roadhouse only because George Russick made me watch it. But I was actually pleasantly surprised by this one because I heard some horrible reviews from some people. It came and kind of went. Doug Liman, the director, distanced himself from the movie. I think it had like a huge budget. He basically was upset because it didn't get a theatrical release. Who cares where it is? Probably Amazon Prime. I'm sure I can look it up right now as I'm discussing it. But I watched it on one of my streaming services, and you know what? The original is obviously a classic. People love that film from the 80s starring Patrick Swayze and his unbelievable hair. If you don't know the story, it's about a bouncer who gets hired, and then he's at a Florida Keys Roadhouse, at least in the sequel. Excuse me. I keep calling it a sequel. In the remake. But then he discovers that paradise is not what it seems. He's an ex-UFC fighter, by the way. In this instance, his name is Dalton. and Roadhouse goes from there. Listen, man, it is what it is. You're coming to this movie and you're going to get humor. You're going to get action. A very bulked up Jake Gyllenhaal. Like I was kind of stunned at just how huge he was in the movie. Like he looks enormous, but he's ready to go. And he's charming and funny. There's one scene in particular I really enjoyed where he's, again, his role is that life of a bouncer. So before he's about to just crush these guys, he goes, "Hey, I just want to ask, do you know where the local hospital is?" They're like, "What?" And he asked me, "What hospital?" He's like, "Because you guys are going to need a hospital." And he's so casual in his delivery. It's a pretty funny scene. They're like 20, 25 minutes. Like, "Okay, well, I'm going to fracture your orbital bone and I'm going to break your wrist. You're going to need some help here with this concussion." And he ends up destroying these guys. Later on, there's actually a callback to the scene, which is funny. But if you want action on a Saturday night, if you want some decent humor, you could do worse than Roadhouse. I love the locale. It's beautifully shot in Florida. God, I mean, you're watching that movie, you said, God, I got to get to Key West sometime. Sun-dappled cinematography. And one of the weaknesses, again, the second half I did not think is as strong as the first half is Conor McGregor's in the movie. He plays one of the nemesis / foils, and I just thought he was so amped up. He was so cartoonish and so ridiculous. I couldn't take him seriously. So I'll give Roadhouse 2.5 Maple Leafs, again, for the humor, the commitment from Jake Gyllenhaal to the role and the action. But I will say Conor McGregor, I thought was maybe a little bit too much nose candy hair offset, but it was a little too much to take. And the second half gets a little bit too cartoonish for my liking. But if you want to check out Roadhouse, I believe it's on Amazon Prime. You can check it out. Speaking of streaming services, Presumed Innocent and Apple Plus. What do you got, Harry?
Well, so here's the first thing. It's funny we went Roadhouse into this. The great TV and film podcast, The Watch with Chris Ryan and Andy Greenwald. They were talking about a funny, reality, maybe just how the sausage of Hollywood works. But you can tell Gyllenhaal shot Roadhouse around the same time he shot Presumed Innocence, because this is the most jacked defense prosecution lawyer you'll ever see. Gyllenhaal in Presumed Innocence is busting out of his 3-piece suit. He is just so big, which is funny. The movie is
the most bulked up lawyer you've ever seen in your life.
Yes. The Presumed Innocence is so far it's there 7 episodes as of right now. I think the final episode comes out next Wednesday. It's a tale of two seasons so far. The first 3 or 4 episodes, I'm texting everybody I know. Like I've talked to you about it. I was like, this show is amazing, and it really is. It's this kind of 90s style law procedural, but it also has a more modern kind of investigating the family unit. Gyllenhaal's really good. All the performances. Peter Sarsgaard is excellent in it. The one of the other defense attorneys. Just a bunch of really kind of unique ways to play it. Like some of the bad guys are just off kilter in this really fun way. Episodes maybe 3, 4, 5, or 4, 5, 6 get a little formulaic, like, oh, it's the end of the show and oh, a new development happens, right? I found myself a little bit like, okay, this is just now a regular TV show, but I am excited to see how the end goes. I've heard this movie is based on a book that came out in 1987 and then was made into a movie in 1990. I've heard that the thing that everybody freaked out about with the movie and the book was the ending. So I am excited to see if they can wrap it up. If it ends up being a excellent show with a few slow episodes and an excellent ending, that's what I'm hoping for. So I would say go check it out for the first 4 episodes alone.
I believe it's going to be renewed for season 2. There's been buzz around it, but to your point, something must happen. The ending is be like, well, I don't know if Gyllenhaal is going to come back, so maybe that's a reference to people who have read the book or know the ending. But regardless, I didn't realize it was originally based in a book, and Harrison Ford was in the movie back in like 1987. So again, if you want other context, you can watch that film or you can watch the series. But you definitely enjoyed Out of the Gate. We'll see if it ends up finishing as strong as it appeared to be. All right, moment of truth is here. The great Hall of Famer Joe Buck. All right, as you all know, I was recently at the Sports Emmy Awards, so I won't stop shutting up about it. And we were nominated for MLB Tonight for Outstanding Studio Show Daily. And I had said to my boss, Mark Kayafa, can I go to the Emmys? He goes, listen, we're not going to win, but if you want to go see some old ESPN friends, sure, all for it. As I'm there, going into the line, I see one of my favorite sportscasters. Naturally, get a little bit nervous, think of what to say. I've already got it. Comes very quickly to me. I mosey my way over, and thankfully his wife gives a look of recognition. That's a good sign. And she shakes my hand, smiles, and then this man says to me, broad smile on his face, eager look, you do a great job. And I said, oh my God, Joe Buck just complimented me. The night's already been made. Screw the Emmys. And I say to him, I've got a very specific compliment for you, Joe. He says, all right. I said, your book, Lucky Bastard, which I loved. You had a great tribute to your dad. You mentioned we'll see you tomorrow night, which is one of the greatest calls of all time. Why it was such a good call? Because of the plexiglass at the Metrodome. To be able to call that home run on the fly was so incredibly difficult. And Jack nailed it out of the gate, literally bat off the ball, hit deep for Mitchell. And also the fact the Metrodome had all the homer hankies. They were white, and it's a white baseball. To catch a white baseball over the plexiglass, amazing. And as Joe's about to answer, Ryan Clark comes in over the top, completely interrupts us. The moment's over, but Joe does give a smile and a thumbs up. So without further ado, the 8-time Emmy Award winner, 24 World Series, 6 Super Bowls, 5 U.S. Opens, and now a member of the National Sports Media Association Hall of Fame, and by the way, a member of Canton as well, the NFL Hall of Fame. We can pick up our conversation with the great Joe Buck. JB, it's great to see you, man.
That is a great introduction. I'm not worthy of it. I also know that when you started it, I thought, wow, he had the same interaction with Costas because I can't believe that I rank on your list, but I've always enjoyed watching you. I'm blown away by what you do. It's a different skill set. And I think when you talked about my dad and that home run call with the Kirby Puckett home run in 91, it did stick out to me at that time. That was a rough 2-year period for him. He and Tim were doing games. My dad was on a 2-year deal with a 2-year option. That was the end of his run because they didn't pick up his option. And that was at a time when he was an older man. He really made his career as a radio guy. And TV was a different animal altogether. And that was the year that CBS, the year prior, had fired Brent Musburger. Musburger was supposed to be the main play-by-play guy with Tim. Right. And my dad was going to do the second game with Jim Cott, which would have been way more fun for my dad. I think the intensity of being the national TV announcer at that stage of his career, it just wasn't a good fit. So for us as a family, we were hanging on every word, both Octobers, hoping that it would go well. And when he made that call, I remember sitting there watching it going, God, is it gone? Is it really gone? Did it leave? And he was my hero. And to see him get picked on the way he did by the Rudy Martzkis of the world, and right. These are references that nobody even knows what the hell I'm talking about.
A Richard Deitch of a previous era.
Yes. Richard Deitch was Rudy Martzki 2.0, and I'm going to say that to Richard next time I do his podcast.
It was an awesome call, and again, it was a great World Series. And no matter what, on MLB Network, that Game 7 is one of the all-time greatest, and your dad's voice on there. I remember Game 7. The only other time we talked previously was I was filling it on Mike and Mike, and I told you how much I love that World Series, and I said I've rewatched it on DVD. And that Game 7, I remember that 7th inning, the double play call, and your dad just goes, out there. And it was just, you see Jack Morris pumping his fist. It was great. And your reaction was, you rewatched the entire 1991 World Series. I'm like, you got to get a life. Like, first of all.
My God.
But how great that World Series is. Both teams went worst to first. Every game was one run. The Puckett theme, Morris and Smoltz in Game 7. Like, it's an unreal World Series. I'm not advocating everyone should go watch it again, but it's a pretty great World Series.
I just, it speaks to a bigger issue today in Major League Baseball that I guarantee you, and it's freeing to not do it anymore in this sense that I can kind of make my comments and I'm not maybe I am the get off my lawn guy, but the game evolves, everything evolves. But what I miss from the game is October matchups of pitchers that just no longer seem to be a priority. It's the last World Series I did, we had a guy in Game 3, and God love him. He's in the big leagues now with Atlanta. I can't remember his name, but he's making his first start ever in the big leagues in Game 3 of the World Series. And you talk to Brian Snitker, it's like, what do you expect out of pitcher X? And he's like, oh, we hope he can get through 1 inning. I'm like, what? That's where we are. We're hoping the starter can get. I remember those matchups of, my God, it's Jack Morris against John Smoltz, or it's Pedro Martinez against Andy Pettit or Roger Clemens. And, that's such a big selling point when you get to October. Like, okay, this rotation is set up for success because they've got their 1 ready to go in Game 1 and their 2 ready to go in Game 2. And it isn't like that. That's the part I miss the most about Major League Baseball in October, that trying to line up pitching, it just doesn't seem to be that big of a priority anymore.
No, you're right about that. By the way, good news. Joe's going to make his return to the booth. We're going to ×2. We'll get to that later on, back with the Cardinals, which is really a moment which is going to be great for his boys, Wyatt and Blake, to see Dad calling baseball again. We want to talk a little movies, though, because this is called Cinephile, and Joe's got not only friendships with notable guys who just got nominated for Emmys in Paul Rudd and John Hamm, but also is an acclaimed actor himself. Take a listen to this clip. This is me and Hank Azaria talking about Joe's work on Brockmire.
Amanda Pieces have had more than a bathhouse in 1978. Joe Buck didn't in your bed. It was Musburger. And what I will...
True story. Another true story.
I've never met Joe Buck. I love his work. I love his dad, obviously, too. But I want to know how... Because I'm guessing he was eager to say these lines. I'm sure Kirkchen would have been a little demure. But particularly the line, I was born in Florida. Of course, I've had a...
Which Joe did deliver quite convincingly. You're exactly right. Kirkchen was a little... more like, like the 11th grader at the prom, not sure what was going on.
Right.
But Joe was enthusiastic. And Joe took part in the short that we did years
Funny
ago.
or Die.
And he was obviously quite game then. I have to say, honestly, Joe wasn't good in it like, he was good considering he's a sportscaster. Acting it.
Yeah.
We could, if we hired an actor to play a Joe Buck-like character, he could not have done a better job.
Yeah.
Honestly. He was amazing.
I'm with you. And Tim,
of all the great calls he has made in his career, and there's been plenty to choose from when it comes to Joe's career, I'm going to tell you, as far as just funny lines, I was born in Florida. Of course, with a finger up my ass. I mean, that's all-timer.
Of all the lines that I was asked to say, that was the one I was like, I don't know that. Now, would I say that fucking around with my friends?
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, that's my sense of humor. But to be seen, you're just worried that everything's going to turn into a meme. And you're just worried in today's world that when you say something like that, it gets picked up and that's all. There's no context. There's no nothing. And then it's Joe Buck saying some insane line. But
by the way, and I had to quickly verify. I go, wait, was Joe in Florida? Yep, St. Petersburg, Florida.
I was born St. Petersburg, Florida. So I have free reign to say that. It's legitimate. I mean, that I was born in Florida, not the other part. But yeah, so I loved every minute of that. I didn't know what to expect when I showed up in Atlanta for the taping of that. I obviously knew the character. I knew why I was there. And it was a weird mix of sportscasters, all of us together. And I just was like, I'm just going to go for it. I don't care. And Kirkchen's the best. I love him. And I mean, a lot of great guys, but I was like, I am going to take advantage of this and do my best and try to really act. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But to see him, I mean, now when you have him back on, you can play this for him, for Hank. Yeah. But to see him do these monologues and do these speeches when he gets up and he's actually addressing an entire room of people, and to do it over and over and over again, I'm not saying it's Nicholson and like A Few Good Men, but it felt like that because he just kept nailing it. I mean, I don't know, because he's so funny, I don't know that people realize how talented and great an actor he is. And it always bugs me when people talk in Hollywood or on a talk show and they're like, oh my God, so-and-so, the actor, was so giving and just a delight to work with. And I'm like, will you shut up? But I got it because it was very friendly. Like I kind of understand that now because he made it easy for me to step into that character, and he was receptive to whatever I was trying to throw out there. So I kind of get it. I had fun with it. I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah, it's like tennis. It's got to work out both sides, and you and Hank were great together. Paul Rudd is an Emmy nominee thanks to his work on Only Murders in the Building. His first nomination, supporting actor, just got announced yesterday. I met Paul Rudd years ago at the Sundance Film Festival, and I'm really excited to meet him and Paul Giamatti because it's a baseball movie. It's called The Catcher Who Was a Spy, famous story, Mo Berg.
Yeah,
I regret to announce
one of the few books I've actually read.
So Rudd walks out, and it's Utah in January, which is not great, but pleasant guy, very handsome. We all know the blue eyes. And we talked a little bit about the movie, and he says it was so great to do a baseball movie, and we get to shoot at Fenway. And then I said, I know you're a huge Royals fan. He said, yeah. And I said, give me your favorite player of all time. And he said, Willie Wilson. And I don't know why I found it funny. Maybe it's just the alliteration of Willie Wilson, or you and I picture Willie Wilson. I just pictured Paul Rudd watching Willie Wilson, but it was really funny to me. But like, he's a legit Royals guy, and you guys have known each other forever.
Yeah. So the story is we have like our own little 6 degrees of separation and like our Kevin Bacon guy. And that person is my friend Preston Clark from high school. So Preston was a year ahead of me, my best friend in high school, mainly because he could drive before I could. And I was taking advantage of that. And then he goes to KU,
Right.
and he is in a fraternity, Sigma Nu. Even though Paul distances himself from the fact that he's a frat boy, he was a frat boy. Let's throw that out there. He's a Sigma Nu. And he was roommates or suite mates, my friend Preston, with Paul. So this is in college. This is before Paul is Paul, obviously. But it wasn't long after that he was in Clueless, I guess it was. It was like the biggest thing that he did. So anyway, I've known him. He and my friend Preston drove to Indiana to visit me. I went to KU to visit them. And he's never changed. He is the same sweet, nice, engaging person at 55 that he was at 18. And I can say the same for Ham. I mean, Ham was always kind of like the stud.
Yeah.
We went to high school at rival high schools. So back to the Kevin Bacon thing, Ham dated my friend Preston's little sister.
Gotcha.
And Ham had lost his mom, would eventually lose his dad, and grew up in my friend Preston Clark's house, basically.
Gotcha.
And so I've known Ham from laying around on the couches when we were even before that, like 15 years old. So, and it all gets back to my friend Preston. His sister, Sarah, was in the show 24 and was in the Twilight movies. And it just goes around and around and around. And I've been able to meet a lot of these people like Adam Scott and different guys that I've met through Paul and John. And so it's been an unbelievable little grouping of people that we've all, enjoyed each other, but also met a lot of really cool people because we're friends with them.
Yeah, Ham, a double Emmy nominee. Of course, he was fantastic in Fargo. I really enjoyed his performance. I met him at the Critics' Choice Awards earlier this year, and he was cool. Like, we're talking a little bit, just shooting the breeze. As you know, whenever you want to talk to people, like these celebrities, these awards and such, smoking area or the bathroom. So I don't think he smokes, but I think his wife went to the bathroom, or his lady, and I was like, I'm going to catch him here for a minute. He's going to wander around. And he was nice enough. He was engaging. But you know where I got him on was once we went to the sports talk, because he hears Mad Men every day of his life. But once you go, hey man, I know you love the Blues. Let's talk Rick Mahar and Craig Janney. All of a sudden now he lights up like he's a legit.
Especially those two names. I mean, it's not like you're going, hey, what do you think of Ryan O'Reilly? It's back in our day. So yeah, and he's a legitimate sports fan. He's one of the smartest people I know. I mean, and I've met a lot of smart people, but he remembers everything. He's very diverse. He's the guy that you want on your team in a Trivial Pursuit game. That was always the joke about John, even when we were younger. Like, whoever had John on their team was going to win. And he's a unique guy. And I remember everybody has this story, but I can remember when he got the script for Mad Men, and he was so close to just cashing it in, leaving LA. He was waiting tables. He was done with the life. He'd already been back and taught at his high school. And he was close to just going down the drain with that career and starting something else. He would have been successful in anything. But I remember he's like, it's on AMC. I mean, who the hell watches AMC? And right. And then he went and did it. And it was, but I'd seen him in things, and I was just like, why is nobody figuring out how good this guy is?
Yeah.
And because of all my friends, he was the guy that, even with Paul, because I knew him so well, it was like, I'm watching Paul do a character. I'm watching Paul in a movie. That's Paul, my friend. But Ham was just like blended right into the character. And I was like, somebody's missing the boat on this guy. You're always biased because they're your friend, but I'm really fortunate that I've been able to not only be friends with them at a young age, but to maintain these friendships all these years.
I think that's the key, is the maintaining of the friendship. Because I remember when you did Joe Buck Live, the HBO show, everyone always remembers the Artie Lang appearance, but Rudd was on that show and he was telling
Yeah.
stories. But yeah, no, Joe's dad gave me advice. He was, smoke a lot of cigarettes, drink brandy. That's how you can be a broadcaster, like stuff like that. And when you got inducted into Canton, I rewatched the video yesterday. It was amazing for a guy who is so unflappable as you are, who is eternally poised and measured. That's the only time I think I've ever seen you rattled. And it was Paul Rudd that did the announcement that you're going into Canton, which was cool.
Yeah, it was cool that Fox had reached out to him, and they told me at halftime, they're like, I just remember that night. I think we were doing Cleveland against Cincinnati, and that could be wrong, but I think that's what it was. And they're like, hey, stick around at halftime. They want you and Troy on camera. They're going to surprise you guys with something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, God, now I got to say something nice about Troy again. It's another award for Troy Aikman. I got it. Okay, Mr. Hall of Famer. And then it was me. I was like, what? What the hell? I that was so not on my radar. And Eric Shanks, my boss, had called my family and everybody was watching. So, and I remember that they asked Rudd when Rudd's voice came up and he did the voiceover of the video. I was thinking, I hope that didn't piss off Rudd. Like it was too much work for him, but it didn't, I guess.
No, it was fantastic. It really was very, very cool. Again, we're talking to Joe Buck, the voice of Monday Night Football. We'll talk about his return to the booth coming up here momentarily. You obviously now just got inducted to the National Sports Media Association Hall of Fame, which was so cool because you got in posthumously with the great Tim McCarver. And for me, the soundtrack to 24 World Series, and a vast majority of those are you and Tim together. There's a great article that Michael Rosenberg did with you. Michael, of course, co-wrote the book, Lucky Bastard, with you, but a great SI article a few years ago. And it's in the vault. You can check it out. And the funniest part of it is this. In the first two paragraphs, he's talking about you getting set for a game, and you're saying Greg Schiano at the name. Sounds a little dated, but you're like, you say Schiano, I say Schiano, like tomato, right? And then it says, moments before the broadcast begins, Buck has now started a tradition where he turns his part to Tim McCarver and says, hey, one thing, fuck you.
Yes.
And I burst out laughing, just picturing like an aging Tim McCarver being said. When was the first time you did this to Tim?
Well, it was very deliberate because Tim, by the end, and I don't think Kathy, his daughter, would mind me saying this because I lived it. The one thing, he could do games till his last breath. But the one thing that he got nervous for was the on camera before the game. And I remember we were trying to make it less nerve-wracking for him. And I said, how about this? How about you know everything about that there is about to know about these teams. I know enough. I know what you want to talk about. Let me just ask you something on camera at the beginning of the game, which nobody cares about anyway. The stand-up, as we call it, nobody cares. Nobody's grading that. They just want to watch the game. But how about if I just ask you, like they come into the booth on camera, you don't know what I'm going to ask you, and I ask you something, and we engage with each other, and then we move back to the game. And we tried that. It didn't really work. And I'm like, how do I pop this bubble of stress for him? And I just remember doing a World Series, and I was like, oh my God, they're counting us down. I'm like 10, 9, I'm like, oh my God. He's like, what? And I went, I gave him the finger. And he was the best audience. He had the greatest laugh.
Right.
And he's like, and then we came on and he was a different guy. And so every time, so then he'd have this yellow legal pad that he would write out the entire on camera. And then I go, hey, do you have a pen? And he'd reach around, fumble around, and hand me a pen. And I'd grab his yellow legal pad and I'd draw a hand with the finger coming out of the hand on the legal pad. I hand it back to him and he'd laugh at that. Or I'd act like the producer was talking to me in my ear. I'm like, oh, wait, okay, so they changed the entire lineup. All right, so now the guy who's hitting third is now hitting sixth. All right, the guy who was leading off, he's out of the lineup. And then he would be like, what? I mean, what? And because he would write the lineups in with pen in this cursive writing. And every time it was all an effort to get him to laugh. And I do that for Troy too, because he can get intense. And
right.
I'm sure it drives them crazy, or drove Tim crazy, drives Troy like, shut up, quit doing it. But I do it, or I would sing into the microphone for the whole crew just to screw around, to have fun and just lighten it up, because we're just doing a game.
I cannot wait to give the finger to Albert Pujols or Harold Reynolds.
Do it, yeah. Do it to Harold. I'm sure I did it to Harold for the 2 years we did games.
That was great fun. One of my favorite McCarver moments with you, and I hope you remember this because I hope I remember
I
it
won't.
right. Sometimes the memory doing well. It was one of those epic Red Sox Yankees games, and it was Brandon Arroyo was pitching, and McCarver says Bronson, and you gently correct him. You just go, yep, Brandon Arroyo once again on the mound for the Red Sox. He does it a second time. I want to see like an inning later. Again, Bronson. And you go, all right, Timmy. Yep, it's Brandon Arroyo. And I swear to God, this happened. I wish I could find the clip. The third time he did it, you said, and I was on the floor. You go, did you go to school with like a Bronson Arroyo?
I mean, but that's the stuff that we had. I had license to do that.
Right.
And I had license to even say stuff on air that you would typically say to the producer to get him to tell.
Right. And talk back. Hey, just correct
talk back.
McCarver.
Go,
right.
hey, tell him it's.
Yeah.
And in this case, it just played better because, again, he was such a great audience.
Right.
That he always got the joke and he wanted to laugh that I could say it on air. And so all the time we would. There are many examples of that, and all of it was to get him to laugh because he had such a great laugh.
Speaking of laughs, Daddy Issues, great podcast, you and Oliver Hudson, but I believe it has been discontinued because I'm still subscribing, rating, and reviewing. But you did 134 episodes. We're up to 334 here
Jesus.
of Cinephile. But it was a great pod, man, because you showed so much of your life, and it was not Joe Buck talking about sports, which as much as I love listening to, it was great hearing you talk about being a dad. Trudy and Natalie, of course, your grown daughters, Wyatt and Blake, twin boys with Michelle. But you and Oliver, great chemistry, and it was genuinely funny. I mean, you would talk about random. I remember one time you were talking about Michelle, and you're like, man, we've been at each other's throats all weekend. And then the next week she'd come on the show, and I'm like, wow, like this is very authentic and revealing. I assume you just, for whatever reason, it stopped now. But
I just got sick of trying to schedule something with a sloppy person. I mean, Oliver is just like, hey, what time? Every time we'd get on. And then we had the worst fight one time, and it's on the podcast when we had Matthew McConaughey as a guest. And he was on a call, and we're supposed to go, let's say, at 9:30 in the morning, and now it's 9:35, and now it's 9:40, and now I'm texting him like, get on this fucking thing he's about to come on. And he's like, hold on. We fight like two old men, and so he gets on, and I'm like, whatever smart ass thing I said, and he just goes off. You're such an asshole. I knew it. I was sitting there, and it's the greatest fight. Like, I could watch it. It makes me laugh because I am at this point the most. I'm just poking him by being like I don't care. And he's freaking out. He's like, fuck it. You interview McConaughey by yourself. I hate you. And so we ended up selling it as an idea, not as a podcast thing, but to Fox, as a scripted animated show. And the whole point was exactly what you talked about. Two middle-aged guys. Right. I'm 7 years older than him. I'm probably more the conservative of the two. He's the liberal guy. He talks about smoking weed. I could never talk about that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. He talks about sex with his wife. It's like Oscar and Felix. So that was the whole point and why I thought it was sellable to Fox. I don't know if anything's going to come of it, but that was the fun of it. I love the guy like a brother, and it was just nice to talk. We went from having like all of our friends on as guests to just basically turning the mics on and talking. And it was just great to catch up once a week.
Yeah, it was genuine and authentic. It was really, really funny. We got a few more minutes left here with Joe before I let him go. Making a return to the booth for all of us baseball fans. The first one didn't go well thanks to Mother Nature, but it was still a lot of fun to hear you and Chip Carey tell lots of great stories. So July 29th is notable because it is the birthday of Geddy Lee, Ken Burns, Stu Gatz, and myself, and Joe Buckley making his return to the booth. So a birthday present for me. You'll be back in the booth. God willing, man, the weather's going to hold up, and hopefully Wyatt and Blake will get to see Dad call a game.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in St. Louis, do not get your car washed on July 29th because it will rain. There's no doubt in my mind. But it was fun. I realized when I sat down the first go around when it rained out against the Cubs how much I really wanted to do it. As we were sitting there, it's like, God, and it wasn't it wasn't, I guess it's frustration, but it was more like, man, is this not going to happen? And I would have sat there and told stories about my dad, about, Chip's grandfather. Chip's dad got the short straw because we never even talked about Skip, who's an unbelievable great
Sorry to
announcer.
interject, but again, during COVID, I rewatched the 92 NLCS Game 7, which McDonough did an unbelievable job on. Of course, one of the great games ever, Sid Bream. And you're right, Skip Carey's call is also legendary.
Oh, my God.
Like, amazing.
Yeah, and Chip, and he's very open about this, was never really close with his grandfather, especially as a kid, but his dad was amazing, so we didn't even get there. So I really want to do it, and I want to do it not just for Blake and Wyatt to see me call a game, but just to kind of rework those muscles and to do a game kind of from the local angle instead of always having everybody think you hate their team because you're getting excited when the other team hits a home run and you're pissing everybody off at a time when everybody cares the most. So it'll be nice to do it, whether I was doing it for the Cardinals, which is a part of my DNA, or if the Rockies said, hey, do a game for the Rockies, the Rangers, or whoever. You do a game with a completely different mindset than you would do a national game. So that will be fun to go back and do.
Which, in calling games for over 30 years now, 4 biggest celebrity baseball fans. I was thinking about this. Now, I don't want to just say Kevin Costner's done baseball movies, knows baseball, but like if you texted them now, if you texted Jason Bateman, who was on Daddy Issues, he would know there's 7 Dodgers in the IL and Yamamoto's in the 60-day IL. And wow, my God,
he's obsessed.
So Bateman to me is locked. Like, because I asked one of the guys on Ozark, he's like, no, he would DVR games. He would absolutely get up at 6 a.m. So I'm like, he's in. So Bateman's one of the 4. I would also put in St. Louis. You know how much Billy Bob Thornton loves the Cardinals. I think he's also locked in.
Quick story. Went with a friend because my buddy Jason Patrick, another name drop, is in that movie. And we're inside the Alamo when they're shooting the movie The Alamo. And I'm talking to Billy Bob, and he's talking to me about my dad. And he's talking to me about the Cardinals bullpen. And he's like, I mean, they got to get another left-hander. And then they're like, all right, everybody quiet on the set. He's like, hold this for a second. And I hold his Gatorade or whatever he's drinking. And they go, action. And then he walks up on this walkway in the top of the Alamo. He walks up and down, back, looks, comes back down. He's like, so anyway, the Cardinals need a left-hander in their bullpen. This is the most surreal thing of my life. So yes, he's
Billy Bob's in. I would put J.K. Simmons in that mix because he told me it's in his contract to watch Tigers games like wherever he is. Like he gets a salary, so he's up there. Can you give me a 4th? Like if we texted him, he is watching
better.
his team. Yeah, better in the Cubs. Good one.
It's legitimate. The first time I met him, another name drop, but I go backstage in his dressing room as we're drinking Coronas. He's got a case open with baseballs, gloves, bats. So when they do a sound check in these stadiums or in an arena, they'll play catch and throw the ball around. He's got an entire Hall of Fame in this warehouse where they do some of their recording, not as much anymore. And it wasn't like, oh, the Cubs are in the World Series, let me become a fan. His greatest memories are of going to Wrigley Field as a little boy with his uncle taking him and being outside. He can name every lineup from like 1978 forward. So it's fun to talk to those people because they want to know about my world, and I obviously want to know about theirs, but it is legitimate. It's not let me sit in the front row so I get seen.
Yeah, it is legitimate. All right, we have to close with this. So you've had an incredible career. As I mentioned, latest Laurel, National Sports Media Association Hall of Fame. You got to watch the speech. Before Joe came on, I watched the clip where he's talking about a kid. You got to look it up. It's a great, great speech. Very, very funny as always. You went in with Jason Stark, so I have to mention this. So Jason went in the National, of course, the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown a few years ago. I wasn't able to make the induction. I was there for Kirkchin a couple years ago, which was awesome, and I was so happy. Anyways, Jason, I felt very guilty. He comes back and he calls me. He's like, hey, I got something for you. I go, oh my God. I go outside and he hands me a hat and it says Jason Stark, National Baseball Association Hall of Fame. Like, oh my God, they give you like hats. I go, this is amazing. I'll post it like on Twitter. He's like, no. And he's like, he's very conspiratorial about it. He's like, let's just, just between us, like just when you're mowing the lawn. I go, So you're giving me a Jason Stark Hall of Fame hat, but you don't want me to brandish it, which is very atypical. You would think you want to support the fact of the Hall of Fame. You
Yeah.
want me to just keep this around the house with the kids. So
Yeah.
eventually you are going to get in the Hall of Fame. I want to get a Joe Buck Hall of Fame hat.
Well,
And to
I mean, they
story-
don't give you hats. Somebody made those for Jason. It's not like they go, hey, you're in the Hall of Fame. Have a hat.
but to your
Here's
point,
a case of hats.
when you're on the ballot, it was you, Dan Schulman, and Al Michaels. And Al Michaels, spoiler alert, wins it. And I'm filling in for Brian Kenny that week. I go, listen, I'm a big fan of these three guys. Can I do an essay on each one? Then whoever wins will do it. I go, okay. So I'm doing research on you and looking up your best calls. Schulman, of course, fellow Canadian. I'm like, great. I get to text Dan. He tells me his life story, things that happened to him, how he got his break at ESPN. And I didn't get to Al Michaels yet. The night before, they go, hey, by the way, Michaels won. I go, what? I go, I got this great Joe Buck. I got this great Dan Schulman. They go, hey, Michaels won. I go, okay, whatever. Just play 85.
I mean, come on. Next time, text me. I'll tell you who's going to win. It's not going to be me. I'll tell you it's Al. Just throw Dan and mine's away.
Well, the best part was Costas was on the committee, and then after Al won, he texted me, goes, hey, can you give me Schulman's number? I text Dan just to make sure it's okay. And Schulman, to your point, goes, what, is he going to apologize for the fact he got his buddy Al Michaels in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly. I mean, if that ever comes to pass, it'll be great. It was the greatest highlight of my dad's life. 1987, sitting there as a senior in high school. I'd never seen my dad that proud of himself because he was a very selfless guy. But yeah, it's special, and I got to be there for Tim's, which was awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, next time just send me a text. I'll
give you
tell
a
you
heads
which
up.
one.
And again, we'll close with your dad. It was a great advice. I thought this just the other day. Carlos Rodon is at a bad stretch, and I said he's been terrible lately. And Yonder Alonso was like, wow, dropping bombs. And this was advice I asked you the previous time we spoke on Mike and Mike. It's the best advice your dad ever gave you. And you said, you know what? I played high school baseball. I was a decent player, but whatever. And my dad said, always respect the players. Never make it personal. If you're going to dig on a guy, you can say, for lack of effort, you could say, it looks like he's dogging it, whatever. But he said, if a guy's struggling, he's giving honest effort, you can't rip him. And afterwards, I was like, I should have just said, Carlos Rodon has been struggling lately. He's been pitching terrible lately. That's fine. Here's the numbers. This is his ERA. But never make it personal. Never say this guy sucks, this guy blows, etc. So your dad's advice still rings true.
It was. We were in the car on the way to my first year in AAA in 1989, which is in that era that you're talking about with the "see you tomorrow night" call when it happened 2 years later, and he said, he called me Buck. He's like, Buck, you've been watching big league baseball your whole life. You played it enough to know how hard it is. And when you're on the mic, now you're going to be watching AAA guys. Some are on their way up, some are on their way down. Unless you feel that you could have made the play, you could have made that play 10 times out of 10. Realize that they're giving their best effort and trying, and they're not trying to make mistakes. And I've always thought that. Now, I also saw my dad get called on the carpet by players when I was a kid. Milt Thompson, I remember one time, was playing left field for the Cardinals, and somebody base hit to left, and Thompson was playing shallow anyway, and a guy scored from second. Thompson bounced it 19 times, throwing it to the plate. My dad said, if you're not going to throw a guy out from there, you're not going to throw a guy out from anywhere. And the next day, Milt was like, God, Jack, I mean, come on. That was, I'm sorry, Milt. I just got a little carried away. So, I mean, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody is fallible in that instance. But sometimes you watch it with your heart when you're doing a team's games. And yeah, it's a good reminder.
By the way, Aaron Boone loves doing an impression of your dad. It made me think of, as you were doing it, he would always do, it was specifically your dad calling like a Cowboys game of like, it looks like I run to the right, Jack. Aikman to Novacek, first down Dallas.
Yeah. It was Hank Stram would be like, and they're going to run right, Jack. They're going to run right. He's like, hand off over to the left. Yeah, but he would just do it. He probably didn't have to say to the left, but just to dig Hank, he would be like, oh, they're going to run right, huh? Off to the left. They're running behind their left tackle. Like, good try, Hank.
Too funny. The great Joe Buck. He's a National Sports Media Association Hall of Famer. He's in Canton as well. He'll, of course, be calling Monday Night Football October 14th in the Meadowlands, close to MLB Network. Maybe he'll get stop by, see me and Harold and Tom Verducci, his old buddies. And, of course, we're returning to the booth July 29th, the Cardinals game. I want to close with this. I started with the Emmys. I'm going to close with the Emmys. Our category is 44th of 45 at Standing Studio Show. I said, oh my God, I turned to our producer. I go, if we lose, this has been an unmitigated disaster.
It's amazing how slow time moves in that place.
Holy smokes. I said, now I have such respect for any sort of award nominee. You don't know any of these people. You feel like this is a gigantic waste of time. And thankfully, the Kid Mero walks up there. And I'm thinking to myself, because I said, Mark Kaff is going to speak, our senior VP, and Chris Rollbacker, CP, goes, but they might ask you to say a few words. Like, oh, no, listen, talent always gets the spotlight. I just want to be on the stage. Quite frankly, I want a picture on the stage, but I don't need to speak. And I thought, what could I possibly say? And I go, you know what? Maybe I'll mention Joe. I'll say, hey, it's very important. I know this is a self-absorbed industry, but it's very important to pay it forward. And earlier tonight, I got to meet Joe Buck. I've been a fan of his for 30 years, and he sent him a nice compliment. So the next time you meet somebody, some kid in Illinois, hey, give him a nice compliment. And unbelievably, we win the award. MLB Tonight delivers, and I look over. Sorry, this is minutes before. I'm getting ahead of myself. Minutes before we win the award, I see you and Michelle leaving. I go, wow, that's it. I go, wow, there's no point.
You lose, you get out. My category came and went. Goodbye.
Right.
I did that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Mike Breen again.
Right. Mike Breen.
Yeah, there we go. Awesome.
I go, unbelievable.
And then, my mind's going, check, please. Time to go. That's time. I sat here for 9 hours. The amazing thing is, no matter how many times you look through the program, which has all the awards listed in order, it doesn't go faster. It's like, oh my God, we're only here. I mean, I was dehydrated. I had to pee, which is hard to do at the same time. I wanted to get out of there.
Yeah, I totally respect it.
But thank you for thinking of me. And thank you also for not saying anything to then draw the, and there he is. Nope, he's not there.
It would have drawn attention. By the way, Joe left prematurely. He couldn't care less now that he lost.
I was in the back. No, I was in the back. I was watching every minute of it. I just didn't want to disrupt things by going back to my seat. So I was in the back watching.
And I believe you're an 8-time Emmy Award winner. It should be noted. So it's not like you haven't won the thing before. So
no, yeah, I know the feeling. So congratulations.
Thanks so much, man. Seriously, this was a blast, man, and congratulations on what's been an incredible career. The best compliment I can pay you is anytime you're calling a game, it has a big game feel. And either you have it or you don't. You're always smart, you're insightful, you're funny, you work well with your analysts. And I think what's underrated about you and underappreciated is your humility. Because I went back and watched that Hall of Fame announcement, and immediately you thanked Paul, but then you thanked Troy, and you thanked Steve Horn. We know how great these researchers are. You mentioned
it takes a village.
Bill Webb, like all those guys. So it's awesome, man.
All right.
Thanks so much, Joe. Be well,
Appreciate
buddy.
it. Thanks, man.
Tell you what, man, Joe Buck delivered. High expectations going in, had a lot to get to. He was very generous with his time. I think he said he had 30 minutes. We probably went almost 40 minutes. So thanks again to Joe for being so generous and going over such a wide variety of topics. He's a great podcast guest. I've heard him with other podcasts, Richard Deitch or whomever. And what I found about him here is the key is, Harry, like he's there to play ball. You know what I mean? Like some guys might be short with their answers or quick in a different way, but like it sounds funny to say, but on every question, he was genuine, he was thoughtful, he was sincere, and he delivered.
It's true. And a little kind of producer behind the scenes thing I'll say is I've worked with I've been on pods with lots of famous guests, been lucky to do all that stuff. And often the more famous you get, the less good you get at setting up your audio. Right. You've got more people working with you. You got more handlers. You don't get how the microphone works, all that stuff. Yeah. Seeing Joe Buck set up his microphone, do a little tech check, troubleshoot some stuff. I was like, he is the most famous person I have ever seen run a tech check. So, to me, this is just speak maybe the I wanted to be like, that is so amazing that you did that, man. So I really, it's a small thing, but huge hat off to Joe.
I have like immediate panic when it doesn't work right away. Like we saw Joe pop up and I said, hey, Joe, how are you? And then he didn't say anything. He kind of like he was texting. Okay, I'll say in a second. I'm like, hey, Joe, it's audience here. Like, no. And then he put his headphones on. I go, okay, can't hear us now. And then you kind of did one of those like, to the ear, can't hear you. And right away, like I'm overwhelming on the panic meter because it's not going to work. We're not going to get Joe Buck. And like I said, seconds later, there you go, connecting.
You know, it's funny. I was actually panic on 0 because I could see his eyes trying to troubleshoot. Like I could see him looking around. Normally you get the people who like their eyes get really big and they just sort of like stare, maybe unplug something. He was locked in. So I was like, oh, this guy's got it.
Right. Because of his confidence in boys, you had no doubt. Just like
Yeah.
Joe Buck calling the game with Troy Aikman. It's
Exactly.
great stuff to see. All right. Thanks so much once again to Joe, and a big thank you to Harry and the entire crew. And thanks to Harry for putting us on YouTube. This is our first episode now on YouTube. I'm laughing because I'm already a little nervous about the numbers. I hear people tell me like, oh, I got 57 views. So please, let's get more than 57 views. Go tell your friends. Let's make this happen. Apple Podcasts, subscribe, rate, and review. And a big thank you once again to Adam Amin, who was a former colleague of Joe's at Fox. Of course, now he's at, he's still at Fox. Obviously, Joe's now at ESPN, but Adam is the best. He's the guy that I texted him like, hey, do you think Joe would come on? He's like, yeah, dude. He goes, my understanding is that whenever I've dealt with him, he's like, he's very generous with these things, always willing to give back. So a big thank you to my buddy Adam Amin, who does an outstanding job as the voice of the Chicago Bulls. And of course, you can hear him on Fox Sports and Fernelpa's Land Joe. Maybe some more sportscaster guests to come. Maybe I'll get Bob Costas. Maybe Ian Eagle, perhaps, in the weeks to come as we continue talking movies here in Cinephile. And one last scheduling note. Because, quite frankly, the movies in the summer have not been as strong as I look at the schedule here. And, Twisters is coming up and Deadpool versus Wolverine. I'm sure me and Harry or one of us will watch it. But August, a little lean. So we're going to go bi-weekly here, okay, on Cinephile. So don't worry. Keep subscribing, rating, reviewing. But let's go bi-weekly here. Every other week, we'll get our stuff done. But the pod ain't going anywhere. And I appreciate all your support. Until then, I'll see you at the movies.